Hi everyone, and welcome to The Author's Journey, bringing you stories of authors in our community. Today I'm very pleased to have with me Lesley Harman, who comes to us with various stories that she has to share. She is a sociologist, she's a peace activist, she is someone who works for social justice and has written many books across many genres for over 35 years. And so I'm very thrilled to have her with me today to have a conversation specifically around her work and personal transformation, which is one of the areas that she writes about. So Lesley, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Moni. It's a delight.
Thank you. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you embarked on this journey with the written word.
Yeah, well, the first thing that happened in my life that really, I think, signified this part of me was my kindergarten teacher gave me a prize, and it said, Lesley Harman gets the prize for Best Talker.
Best Talker.
Which was code for you can't shut her up.
Right. I love that.
And I did become a storyteller. I like to tell stories. And then in grade 2 was also pivotal when I was told by my grade 2 teacher, I wrote a composition for grade 2. I didn't...
Compositions in grade 2? Normally kids just write a few words.
No, 5 pages.
5 pages.
And she wrote a comment at the end and she said, Lesley, never stop writing.
Okay.
And of course, when you're in grade 2, you don't really take that to heart, but my mother did. And she said, Lesley, pay attention to your teacher. And that's a really important message because I got into education myself. I've been an educator professionally, and I do believe, especially now, actually, with the information society that we live in, that we are losing among our children, this new generation, we're losing the joy of writing and reading and creating. In fact, the imagination is so constrained by our digital age. They don't even teach cursive writing in school anymore. I know. And so for me, a message that I feel very strongly I would like to convey is that your teachers from early on can provide you with the resources to follow your dreams. And if you're a writer, sometimes it helps to have support from the people around you, influential others who will say, yeah, you're on a good track.
Yeah, and I think what you say is so important because you're right. Our daughter, we lived in Spain for 7 years, and our daughter's first education was in Spain. And so at the age of 5, she actually was learning how to write cursive. And this is something that in that system over there still they value the ability to write. So when she came here, she was already able to write in cursive, and she was already obviously a good reader. But that kind of gotten broken out of her because nobody understood her cursive. Her teachers did, but the student didn't understand her cursive. And so she's slowly gotten back into writing, I guess it's called block letters, like letter by letter printing, essentially. But we insist on the cursive. And so we insist that she continue that because it's, for me anyways, part of language, part of expression, part of expressing your creativity, because that all is an element of it. Yeah.
Part of literacy.
A part of literacy, exactly.
And I mean, how are you going to have a signature?
Right.
Practical things as well.
I know.
And so I also should say that a big part of my life was my upbringing as a diplomatic brat.
Yes.
And I cherish that very much now. But as a child, it was challenging. It had its ups and downs. We moved every 2 or 3 years, and to all kinds of places, which well, I'm 61 years old now, so as a child, I was in kind of like the pre-global society where if you traveled a lot to exotic places, it was not normal. And so I was a bit of an oddball, and I took to writing poetry as a way of dealing with my travels. And I also developed a rather pre-sociological perception of the world by going to different cultures from a Canadian lens.
Yes.
And learning about different ways that people live.
Yes,
in rural.
but was it something did you find that your travels brought you out, in the sense of you were out and ready to explore and to write about what you were exploring, or were you more inward looking, trying to interpret what was happening around you? Because that really frames your lens, that really frames how you're going to be writing, I find.
It's changed.
Yeah.
I think as a very vulnerable and impressionable teenager, seeing the world and a lot of social injustice that I was shielded from as a child,
right?
It affected me, and it made me a sociologist.
Yeah.
So I was looking out, but also going inward to process things that I didn't understand. And I'm very grateful that I had the ability to write, because journaling, poetry, reflective notes have a way of being like an ongoing record of my life.
Of course.
And then, of course, when you move on, I wrote my first book of poems when I was 15. That was kind of fun. But then you have to start thinking, well, one of these days I'm going to have to make a living. And how do you make a living out of writing poetry, unless you're Margaret Atwood? And so I decided to become a sociologist, and I got my PhD.
Yes.
And that influenced my my background influenced my research as well, because my interest in sociology was the topic of the stranger.
I love that, and I do remember kind of you telling me about the book and going through generally what it's about, but I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that, because I think that informs a little bit more of what you later write about as well. So can you tell me a little bit about the stranger?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, in sociology we have archetypes that, as in many traditions, and the stranger is definitely one of our big ones, because we talk about groups. And I've always been on the margins. So I learned from a very early age to see the world from the margins, not from the center.
Interesting. So do you identify with the stranger archetype as somebody who's from the outside looking in?
Absolutely.
What benefits does that give you, do you think?
Oh,
as a
I love
stranger?
That question.
Yeah.
Well, ease of moving from setting to setting. I've never had any problem with being shy or uncomfortable. I just look around and fit in. Also, it gave me skills that I brought to sociology to approach people confidently, to understand their lives, and to be able to, I think, learn and grow in a non-judgmental way. And then to become a pilgrim.
Well, I want to talk about that, because that's you know, that's something, because you've moved from you're still a sociologist, obviously. That's not something that leaves you. You became a tenured professor, is that correct?
Yes.
At King's University College out in London. You've taught sociology, I take that, is that right?
Yes.
So you've come from the world of academics, you've come from the world of research, which has its own language, which is structured in its own way, and I would imagine it's quite structured. You're working within certain limitations. And you've moved into the world of pilgrimage, which is about as ancient as you can get and as free-flowing as you can get. So I'm quite interested in that journey of yours from academia into pilgrimage. What called you to pilgrimage and to make that change?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
You're right. I do see it as a big full circle in some ways, and the piece where I became a pilgrim was, as you know, when do you become a pilgrim?
I don't know. When did you become a pilgrim?
Long before I thought of walking the Camino.
Aha.
In fact, I think other than stranger, pilgrim is my other big archetype that I embody. And they're very similar.
Yes.
You can be a
for me that.
Yeah, well, you can be a stranger without being a pilgrim. You can't be a pilgrim without being a stranger. But the interesting thing about being a pilgrim stranger, and this is what I wrote about in this book, was you're not really a stranger on the Camino. When a bunch of strangers get together with a common purpose, they become a group. And I found, without even expecting it, that I described in this book that I had my sociological imagination sitting on top of my backpack.
Yes.
As I walked the Camino.
Yes.
And I started looking around because part of my methodology that I use sociologically is called autoethnography.
Which means?
Which means that we write about the world from our own standpoint, and generally speaking about things we know quite well.
Yeah.
And I've written about all of my work, all of my research has required a certain amount of expertise prior to going into the field. Mm-hmm. And this was no exception. So I did some research on pilgrimage, but I also went open to what might come. Okay. And found myself absolutely drawn into the experience, and almost in a way of having two perspectives. One as actually walking the pilgrimage, but also my little sociological imagination on my backpack. And it was fun because I walk alone. I'm a solo woman walking alone on all my pilgrimages. However, we tend to meet people, and I met 6 different social workers on my first Camino. Right? This was 2008. And everyone spoke English, but they were from all over the world. Wow. And we had so much fun because, well, being a sociologist, I'm sort of a foot in the world of social work. We share a lot of the same meanings and understandings, but different. But they all understand the healing properties of pilgrimage and walking. Mm-hmm. And now we have expanded these understandings clinically to include walk and talk therapy. Yes. And various usage of the very movement that we use on pilgrimage to actually do some real transformative work, including labyrinth walking and that sort of thing. So my whole world was opened up dramatically by that first Camino in 2008. Yes. Well, you know, I too, I'm a pilgrim. It's how we got to know each other through that world. And what you talk about carrying, you're bringing a lot of extra weight, emotional weight. You're bringing your thoughts, your beliefs, all of that is added weight, and that is a part of what you're carrying with you. And part of pilgrimage is learning to kind of lay some of that down so that you can be more open, as you're saying, and a little bit more receptive. And we're gonna explore that a little bit more, but we need to go to a quick break right now. Please stay tuned, everyone, as we continue our fascinating conversation with Lesley Harman. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to The Author's Journey, where I'm continuing my conversation with Lesley Harman, who is a sociologist, who is an author, speaking about many topics. And one of the topics we were just finishing, or just talking about before going to break, was this idea of pilgrimage. And one of the questions that I want, because you are a pilgrim and you identify yourself as a pilgrim as well, in the archetypal sense of the word being a pilgrim. But what does pilgrimage mean to you? What does it mean to you? Thank you. Yeah. I feel that there's bottom line about how I want to live my life. And it's not always easy to achieve, but it's my goal. To be fully present, always. And it's a full-time job to be fully present. Oh, yes. But when I learned the value of that, significantly was my first Camino in 2008, when I actually walked for the 30 days, 80% of the time alone in silence, and learned fully what it meant to be present. Like you see every single blade of grass. You hear every little bird chirping on every fence post. Especially the ones that follow you, and the companions, the dogs that follow. I realized this is the way I want to live my life. Yeah. And so to be a pilgrim to me means to value, above all, being fully present. It makes a lot of other things fall away. The value of other things falls away. But it enables me to be an author.
I like that, because I do believe that writing or creation of any kind, for it to be able to flow through you unimpeded, really is something that is an act of presence. You must be present in who you are. You must be, in how I write as well, just be open to how whatever words need to flow through you in that moment. And presence is a great practice and a great quality to cultivate as a storyteller and as an author. Yeah.
And we have to get out of our own way. And I as a scholar, I know we have many trades that serve us in the field of scholarship.
Yes.
But it's not helpful in other parts of life. Overthinking.
Yes, absolutely.
Overthinking.
Yep.
And I've recently learned this little motto, a mantra almost, to get out of my head. And I practice this all the time. It's helping a lot, mindful meditation.
Yes.
Because it reminds me of being on the Camino. And so then I learned you don't have to be on a pilgrimage to be a pilgrim.
Yeah.
You don't have to be on a pilgrimage that somebody else defines as a legitimate religious pilgrimage or spiritual pilgrimage. For me, being in the moment is my spirituality. It makes everything possible.
Yeah. I love it. I love your definition of that, and I can't think of a more perfect definition of what the journey truly is about, because you go on pilgrimage, you're going on some kind of a journey, but the journey doesn't end. The journey isn't just there, it doesn't end at the sacred destination. It is part of who you are, and truly it is about bringing whatever it is that this pilgrimage allows you to enhance in yourself, to bring it here and live it in your everyday life. So I think that's a wonderful definition, and presence as part of your practice in writing and meditation, because I also meditate before I write as well. And I find, like you, it just allows the words to flow a lot more smoothly, and everything there's a better connection, Yeah. What do you find you're connecting with? What do you believe you're connecting with when you're in presence? When you're present, because this is also part of, I think, the title of your book, the We Are Never Alone. So I want you to touch on that. What are you connecting with?
Well, I have to say that writing for me is a very spiritual experience. It's very mystical. I have trouble calling myself the author of a work.
Yes, how so?
Well, because when I'm in that zone of being fully present, I'm not attached to a lot of other things. It's very nice to feel that's where I'm least attached to my ego. That's where I'm least attached to the outcome. And all of those are the ways in which we say, I wrote that, or I've done this. And when I get into that moment, the present moment of allowing whatever's going to come forth, I move over. I'm a conduit.
Yes.
And I'm unwilling to say where it's coming from, because who knows?
Yeah.
But it's a sacred place. It's a safe place. I feel like my ideas are not mine, but we're all working on this together.
Yeah.
Voices from the past, my teachers, dead and alive, the muses.
Yes.
My inner muses.
Yes.
But I really try to get out of the way of all of those voices. And so collectively, and also when I think of an audience, that's something that occasionally I do, but I tend not to think of audience when I'm first writing, because I want me to write uninhibited at first, and then you play around with things.
Yes. Well, how do you know that you're in that place? How do you know that you're in that place of when you're being the conduit, as you describe it, and not, Lesley the professor, Lesley the sociologist, who is writing for a particular audience? How do you know you're there?
Because these ideas just come. And I know well enough now that I better
Yes.
write it down. This is a really good tip for aspiring authors.
Yes.
Because even though I have an excellent memory, I'll think of something, a flash, an idea, and then I'll be driving and something like that. What I really should do is pull over, get out the notebook I keep in my purse, and
Yes.
just jot it down, even 2 words. And this is what you learn from being a participant observer, which is what I do in sociology.
Yes.
You think you're going to remember things, and personally I don't always.
Yeah.
So I have all over my house, everywhere, those little Post-it notes, and I get an idea, write it down. And I have on my wall above my desk, I stick them up on the wall. And I look at them sometimes. But it's like a bank of ideas. And when I'm ready, I look at my bank. But I think it's really important for me not to have structure. I don't have a time or a place where I write. You have to sit at this desk at
Right.
9 o'clock in the morning till 3, and then you can have fun. No, that's painful.
Yeah.
I go when it moves me.
Yes.
And that is, I think, very spontaneous, and it's a luxury I have.
Yes.
Because not everyone can just drop everything and write.
Yeah, I agree, because I've had authors here who will say that they have, it's a discipline, and so they have their writing time, and it's a structured time, and they force themselves every single day to write so many hours a day or so many words a day, and I see the benefit of that. But I tend to lean more towards the unstructured part, because that's where for me, like you, the creativity just flows. I don't even have to think about it, and it could be in the middle of the night. And like you, I have a piece of paper beside my bed, and if a thought hits me in the middle of the night, I'll get up and I will just write it down. So I think there's benefits to both, and I think each individual has to really tap into what works best for them and how that creative element is going to flow through them. I really believe that.
Yes, find your own way. And I did also
like pilgrimage, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's almost a sense of urgency when I feel a need to say something.
Yeah.
And finding one's voice as an author is extremely important. And I think, again, going to the millennial age we're in, and all of the anxiety. I'm a university professor. We have so many students who are really paralyzed by fear.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Anxiety is epidemic right now.
What are they afraid of?
Failure.
Failure. Failure in their programs, or just failure in general in life?
Look around. It's life. And the university is so important to them and their parents.
Yes, yes.
The pressure is enormous.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I want to tell them, free yourself from this vice of having to do things in a certain way. And it's very hard to tell a 20-year-old that, because they don't dare risk. Writing is risky. But it's, for me, it's the fate of not speaking my truth is worse. So I want young people to face the fact that it's hard to speak your truth, but learn how to write.
Yes.
And you don't have to show anyone. I've written so many things I don't want to show anyone.
Right.
And they made me very happy.
Yeah.
Will never be published.
Right, but I do the same thing. I keep my own diaries, and when you look back, you're able to understand, looking back, how these experiences are influencing how you think, and you understand yourself better through the process of writing it down in that moment. So, I definitely appreciate what you're saying. And if you can believe, we're down to the last 2 minutes of our time together. There are so many more things I want to talk about, but you touched on this idea that I want to explore just briefly, if we can, of how do we encourage young people who are in university, who are doing what they feel they must be doing, what their parents say, what society says, what is the right thing to do. How do we encourage them to listen to their inner voices, to be present? How do we encourage them to be authentic to who they are and to follow their personal passions?
Yeah. Can't do it in 2 minutes, I'm afraid.
I know I can't do it in 2 minutes, I
but
know.
I do want to say,
if there's one thought,
do not squish or squash their beautiful, tender souls.
I love it. I love it. Because there is something, and I do agree with you, that there is something beautiful in every single one of us. There is, I do believe each one of us comes to this world with a unique gift, with a unique perspective, and oftentimes it doesn't fit in with what maybe traditional society is all about. And it is work to really try to look inwards, to look within yourself, to try and figure out what is it that you love, what do you love, what is it that you're passionate about. Just because you're good at math doesn't mean you need to go into finance. You know, it's just, it's don't squash their souls. And maybe that's a message for parents as well, and for everyone, for educators, for all of us. Yeah. And you know, again, last, I have 1 minute left. Any final thoughts that you want to leave our audience with before we say our goodbyes this time?
Well, I'd like to say to everyone, never stop writing, because that was pretty good advice for me.
Yeah. Never stop writing. I love that. I think that's wonderful advice. And never stop reading, never stop creating. I would add my part to that as well. Thank you so much, Lesley. It's been wonderful having you here on the show and having you share your wisdom and your insights with me. So thanks again for coming onto the show, and thank you all for tuning in to this episode of The Author's Journey, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again.